21 Grams is back, and welcome to the third iteration of our show. And in this iteration, we are offering a one-on-one interview with indie artists, and we're going to examine three very specific aspects of the creative soul. The cerebral, which will be all about the chess moves and deep thoughts that go into the aspects of the work and creating the work. The emotional, which will be all about the investment the artist has made in the work and creating it. And the practical, which will all be about the application of common practices, tropes, and ideas. In this episode, we welcome Lily Luchesi. She is a best-selling author of many series and the owner and operator of Partner in Crime Book Services. That being said, I'm your host, Joe Compton, and let's get deep into it. Here now is a new episode of 21 Grams. Hello, everybody. Welcome to 21 Grams, another great episode. I have the distinct pleasure, let me do it that way, there we go. I have the distinct pleasure of welcoming my friend Lily Luchesi to this experience, and it's gonna be awesome. And I'm really looking forward to it. You're one of the few people who have already been talked about on this show this season. We interviewed a couple authors that have so inclined used your services, and they raved about you, of course, because you're awesome, as we know. But
that's wonderful.
Yeah, but that's pretty cool that we have you here. So I was like, let's go right to the source and have the person that's been talked about, and let's talk about it. So let's start by having you introduce yourself, Lily, and tell everybody a little bit about yourself.
First of all, thank you for having me. I always love going on Go Indie Now programs. As he said, I am Lily Luchesi. I'm a USA Today best-selling author and the co-founder and owner of Partners in Crime Book Services. I began my journey in 2011 as a book blogger, which led to me becoming an editor for some of the people I initially blogged for, which in turn turned into me discovering the first traditional publisher where I submitted my manuscripts. And I have been on the author journey since 2015.
That's awesome. We have people here, so hello, Anita. Nice to see you. I wanted to start with that, actually, because it's very fascinating to me. You started very young. You were very young when you started, and you're still very young. You're still young. You know, I'm not trying to make it sound like you're like old now, but
it's been a long time.
Yeah, you are older. And that's just a fact. But you started very young, so I'm kind of curious. When you look at the writer you are now versus the writer you were then, what is the major difference that you feel like? What is different about it for you?
Oh, I can go in a couple different directions for this. The first one would be I am less emotional when I write. I am sort of thinking more critically than I was. When I first started, it was just, oh, this is the idea in my head. I'm passionate about it. Let me go, without thinking of the long term. Which is how, Stakeout turned into 8 books instead of 1 novel. So I'm kind of more aware of that. Uh-huh. And at the same time, I do have a bit more confidence in knowing what I do well. As opposed to when I started querying, I was only 16 years old.
Yeah.
When I was published, I was only 21. So I went through my most formative years as a writer. And my characters and my style, I think, just grew with me over time naturally.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. Do you follow? Are you one of those who subscribe to the adage that the more words you write, that you're not really a writer until you've written a certain amount of words, or that words are, different at a certain point, that it just clicks and changes for a writer?
Not exactly. I do believe in quality and quantity. The more you write, the more accustomed you become to writing. That, of course, helps you set a routine. Mm-hmm. So it does help you put out more work And it does also help you put out better work because the more you write, the more critique, the more feedback you get. But with each individual book, for me personally, there's always this tiny little part of me that feels like this is the first time. This is my first book. I have a novella just released today in a
Mm.
box set, and I have another one coming in 5 days. And I have the exact same excitement I did from the start because it's just every new book's a new adventure. And the only thing that writing for a long time does is it does help you learn and improve, but it
Mm.
doesn't change that little kid like part of you. It's like, yay, I'm writing a book. That stays the same.
Do you feel like maybe there is a more ritualistic aspect to it now than there was at the beginning? Like, were you more of a discovery writer at the beginning, or were you always a planner, plotter, and always had that in you?
I'm still not a planner and a plotter. The only thing I plan my schedule.
Right.
I don't plan my books themselves. I get an idea. I write my blurb. My blurb always comes first. That's the one thing that never changes. And then I just go and see where the characters take me.
Hmm.
I usually know what's going to happen, but I don't plot anything. The only thing that I've done is I have made myself a schedule. Whereas when I
Hmm.
first started my first couple years writing, I had absolutely no schedule. I had no idea how to do any of that, which is why it took me so long to finish my first series. I didn't have the ritual and the schedule in place.
Hmm. Is there something about finishing a series too that changes for you? I mean, because that was a long series, that first one,
Yeah.
and then since then you've kind of been able to trim them down, And I don't know
Yeah.
if that's by design or if that's just the story you're telling. That's how this happenstance is. But I'm just curious if when you finished a series, did that something for you click there as well?
Finishing the series, it didn't do anything for me professionally, but it was more emotional.
Hmm.
Whereas, especially sitting there with paranormal detectives, I spent my formative 20s with them.
Yeah.
It took me 4.5 years to write the 8 books and publish them and get them out. And, I kind of just sat there at my computer and I went to hit submit on the last one. It was like, this is it. Such a huge chunk of my life has gone into this. And I still miss the characters terribly. One day I'd like to revisit Angelica and just see how she's doing, even though her life's boring now. Because they're my babies. Like more than the other series, more than the other characters, those are my babies.
Well, not to spoil it, but there is an opportunity for people to learn more about Angelica here on this network very soon with character driven. Madeline interviewed Lily for that, and I know that they're talking about Angelica.
Yeah.
Sorry, Madeline.
Yes, we had unfortunately had to reschedule today. Madeline's
Oh,
sick.
okay.
But yeah, we'll
Yeah.
be doing that in the next couple of weeks. But
Yeah.
I'm really
Awesome.
excited to just spend like over half an hour just talking about her.
And that's coming, everybody. So that'll be a really great show. You mentioned that she's kind of your first love, your first, this was your first foray. When that you'd love to revisit her and figure that out. What do you think? What do you think that shaping her did for Paige and for other characters that you've created? Do you feel like there's a little bit of her in everything you create, or do you feel like she just taught you something so that you could give that to Paige or another character that you have developing?
There is literally a piece of her in almost everything I write. Like Stephen King with his Dark Tower universe, where it bleeds into his standalones, the Paranormal Detectives universe bleeds into all my other books.
Mm,
So Angelica actually makes appearances in the Coven series. And
yeah.
in book 4, The Coven History, Salem, who's a minor character through the rest of the series, he's the main character in book 4. He actually says, if not for Angelica, he wouldn't be the man that he is because he
Mm,
learned a lot of his mannerisms and how he runs the coven from how she ran Paranormal Detectives. So she directly influenced, and with Paige's series is set in the future after there is no more Paranormal Investigative Division. So that's why she's needed to solve these crimes because there's no one else. So Angelica walked so Paige could run, I guess you could say.
That's kind of awesome. I like that. I love it when you fold other universes together and kind of tap on each other, and stay kind of within the same realm. It's kind
That
of
was the only
interesting.
plotting I ever did, was because I knew I wanted that to happen.
Nice. That's awesome. You know, um, it's going from Paranormal Detectives Coven series to now the Cozy Mysteries, and then you're doing other things that you were telling me about before we started. There's a bit of genre hopping going on within your portfolio, and I mean everything has a little bit of you in it, obviously, and there is a certain theme, and we'll talk a little bit about that because it's Halloween and kind of goes along with that a little bit. But the idea that you're not afraid of that after you have established yourself, you have a following, you have people who read your stuff. So were you ever consciously thinking about, should I ever attempt, or you're like, nah, screw it, I'm gonna just do what I want to do?
The only time I ever consciously thought of that is when I wanted to go into contemporary, which is why I have the Samantha Calcott pen name.
Uh-huh.
That's the only time I ever really thought about it. And the only time since is I'm in a shared world list aim, and it is called Rejected by the Immortal. That's available for pre-order now, and we're trying to get into the USA Today list.
Nice.
I'd love to hit it again. And I wanted, because of course it all fits in with my vibe and my genre. The only difference is these are actually going to be the first Lily books that have sex on page. Not as in depth as my Calcott books. I'm not going that far. But it's going to be the very first time, and I did sit there and wonder, should I change it to the pen name? Is that a better idea? And then it's like, but everything else is branded Lily, except for there being some sex activity. So why would I take that over? This is just kind of me again expanding a little bit more. It's going to have a lot of Paranormal Detectives vibes to it. Both of the stories that I'm writing for it, because it's going to be a standalone. Then there's the short that's in the actual list name itself. So I'm going back to my roots and going back to vampires, but instead of being solitary like Angelica was, I'm actually going to show the building of a nest and how that type of brotherhood and family can help heal someone.
Wow.
In the midst of course, being hunted and rejected and tears and violence,
Yeah, all the things that
my usual brand.
Yeah, yeah.
Tears and violence.
I mean, the gothic darkness that follows, even in Paige's series, which is much more light, but there is still an element of that, and there's still, I mean, and Paige herself is kind of, this gothic princess in many ways. We've always you and I have had this conversation about how important all of that is representing for you, and that idea. But I'm kind of curious, as we're here in Halloween, what you have learned about darkness and gothic that you didn't know going into it, that you've kind of now gleaned upon, that has helped you kind of shape characters and kind of even been light fared with Paige in certain respects, and still have that. Was that a difficult thing for you to sprinkle that in, or was that always, what, I'm just putting me on the page in that respect?
The parts of me that are Paige is a bit more her personality as opposed to her looks. Because she's like how you call her the gothic princess. The term for it is pastel goth, where you like a lot of pink. And if you Google it, you'll see. I mean, there's actually a model who looks almost just like I pictured Paige when I had looked up like for outfit ideas. So that was kind of interesting. But
cool. I like
mixing that in and finding the nuances of gothic. I actually grew up with a goth family, including my grandmother.
Yeah.
Typo Negative, Marilyn Manson, Susie and the Banshees, Depeche Mode. I grew up with all of that stuff.
Yeah.
So that was the goth that I knew. And diving into it more, one of the first, of course, myths you have to debunk is, goths are all Satanists, or they're all witches, or they're all, no, that's not true.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's not true. I know plenty of witches who are so far from goth, it's not even funny.
Yeah.
Another thing that, and it's something that I had to revisit on a very personal level this year, was goth is not obsessed with death. You know, there is a certain beauty in the ceremony surrounding a passing, but it's not, you know, this creepy obsession thing. It's a trying to find the beauty in the darkness. You know, a lot of people, they say, you know, white is pure and black is not. It's,
Yeah.
to me, I think white is plain with no personality, whereas black has depth, it has mystery, it has intrigue, it invites you to come learn more. And that's something that I try and throw into my series with that sort of gothic vibe, is come learn more, dive deeper into this. It's not just, you know, what you see on the cover or what you're reading in the blurb.
I had an art class once, and one of the most fascinating, the only thing that I probably even gleaned from the class was the teacher explaining color, and that white is the absence of color. White is no color. It is white, and black is the color of everything. Everything, anything, any other color combination, you put multiple color combinations together, they're going to turn black, no matter what combination that is. You could do yellow and green and turn it blue, but if you do yellow, green, and blue, it's black. You know, and that always stuck with me, so I can relate to that tremendously.
There
I,
was an art lesson I took when I was very little, and it was almost the opposite of what you're saying,
oh, really?
where you took a color and mixed it with white, and the color became muted. You take red and white and you make pink. You take blue and white, you make a light blue. And the
Sure.
more white you put, the more color gets removed.
Hmm.
And to me, it's like, I don't know if you ever saw the movies Halloween Town on
Hmm.
Disney.
Oh, wow, no.
When when in the first movie they're taking away the magic of Halloween Town, and everyone turns gray and white. You think they would turn black, they turn gray and white and dull.
Hmm.
And that's kind of what it reminds me of. Whereas when they put the color back in, one of the colors that predominantly shows is black, but it's so
Hmm.
lively. And those movies were my childhood. Anyone who knows me knows how much I absolutely adore them.
It's kind of like Pleasantville. Pleasantville, whenever like the when they're bland, they're gray and they're black and white. They're the old movie style 1950s. And then when they express who they truly are, the color comes out in them, and that's kind of the premise of the film. And so it's kind of like that.
Yeah, that's what the first movie deals with, and it's just, yeah, it's some of my favorites.
Awesome. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, there's so many misconceptions about darkness and goth especially, and I'm sure everybody knows because you're very vocal about this. Everybody who knows you, but you're a big BTS person. You're a big K-pop person, and
I'm
that's
a BTS person. I'm not really a K-pop person.
okay. Okay, just BTS, just them.
Yeah,
Everybody else,
there's a difference.
okay. But yeah, it's just I mean, but you know, it's interesting, and I'm kind of curious. That just leads to me thinking about you as a person and knowing you, and then knowing what you write and how you write and everything like that. But there is you. What the coolest thing about the way you write is that there is a little bit of you in it, and so I'm kind of curious how much of that are you editing, out? Are you kind of are you holding things back, or are you kind of just letting it naturally happen, that it just kind of puts you in it just a little bit, so everybody gets a taste of you?
It
And
just naturally happens. The only time I think that I'm ever going to deliberately put something down is, I don't know if you've seen me post about it, something called The Wrong Book.
no.
Um, yeah, I've posted about that a few times with some scenes. It's a Samantha Calcott contemporary, and it has become my trauma dump, where the main character has gone through what I have gone through, and she's dealing
Mhm.
with it. And when the love interest comes, he decides immediately to help her and be there for her. And you mentioning BTS, they were a huge part of the inspiration, not for the plot and the characters so much as how they were there to help me through my dark times.
Mm.
They're kind of being funneled in through as the main male character, as the love interest, how he shows up to help her through her hard times.
Mm.
But
So
another
find
thing is
your inner
one thing
BTS.
that I wanted to touch on, and it's the same thing with Gothic subculture, and the same thing with my books. My books look very dark, well, except for the page books; they're not supposed to.
Mm-hmm.
But the page books have the opposite, whereas they look light and fun, and they have this darkness in them.
Yeah.
Whereas my other books have this darkness in them, but there's also another level to them, a lightness. That's not something I deliberately did, but it's something that shows up in all of my darker work.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I try and tell a lot of people when they talk about, BTS particularly. I can't say, K-pop because I don't listen to a lot of artists deep enough. You see what's on the surface of BTS, especially being in the West. You see, Dynamite and Butter, Permission to Dance, but you don't see Black Swan, Blue and Gray, Butterfly, Tomorrow, Lost, Fake Love. You don't see those extremely dark, deep songs
Mm-hmm.
that border on Gothic.
Mm-hmm.
Especially Blue and Gray. I mean, if I were to make a Gothic movie, that would be the theme song, that and Black Swan particularly. So that's something that as a writer, I love being able to find that in a different type of artist because I never have before. Because as a
Mm-hmm.
writer, I love blending these things. I love being surprising. You're expecting a dark book and you open up and get something else.
I like that too. I really love that about the Page series. And the one thing you can see the discipline in that book because at your craft and how good you are at crafting story, because the idea is that this is a cozy mystery and that Paige is kind of happy-go-lucky in a lot of respects, but she does have issues and she has things going on, and you get those layers. But the the darkness that you're referring to is sprinkled in so that it doesn't lose its coziness. It just enhances the story and moves the story along, which I think that's where most people would fail if they were trying to make, I think a lot of people spend time trying to subvert, the genre instead of just running with it. Was that something you were conscious of? Was that something you were thinking about when you were, putting these cozies together a little bit?
When
Because
it
this
comes
is a
to
different animal for you.
Right. And when it comes to the page books, I was well aware that I was diving into a genre that has, mostly people who have been reading this genre for decades now.
Yeah,
They know what they want, they know what they're looking for, and they know what they absolutely do not want.
yeah.
So when I was sprinkling in my darkness in there, I was a bit aware. There actually are some deleted scenes from book one that were too creepy for the genre. And that's the only time I ever did that because I wanted to make sure that people who love the genre were getting what they loved.
Right.
There's something you expect when you like a genre. And that one thing I want to make sure I delivered while also bringing in my difference to it. What I wanted to do with those books was bridge the gap and make readers who are more urban fantasy based go to cozy mystery because yeah, cozy
Mm,
paranormal, they're fun.
yeah.
I love them. I've read a couple cozy paranormal romances where it's like it goes into the fade to black for the romance scenes. And that's
Mhm.
Terry Gary, her Nikki Stick series. Oh man, I love those novels so much. I've reread them so many times since I was 12. And I almost consider those like cozy paranormal mysteries, but they're romance as well. And she
Mhm.
stops, just short of going too far. And that was, something I was kind of able to learn from as I was writing. Of course, the main reason that I wrote those and are doing my annual Christmas books, both of those are for my mom because those were the genres she loved and got me to love. And got me started, doing me like, her Nancy Drew books and all those, kid mysteries. That's where it all came from. So I wanted to make sure I was honoring a really wonderful, long-lasting genre. The tropes and everything, the market changes, but certain genres last, and that's one of them. And that's very impressive.
Yeah, I agree, and I think I'm curious your thoughts as an editor too. How often are you surprised by how people stay close to a genre, or is that the major problem you see with young writers is that they don't know point of view and they don't know genre, and that's where you have to steer them. Is that what you're finding, or do you find that you're pretty impressed by how people are finding genre and using it properly?
I'm going to collect my thoughts for a moment to not sound. Many of my clients do. Um, they do follow the trend,
Uh-huh.
and a lot of them are reverse harem.
Okay.
There's so many subgenres within reverse harem.
Yeah.
The vast majority are paranormal and shifters.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I love, because you do when you're writing to market, you have to hit the beats.
Yeah.
Period. There's really not much room for deviation. So I always make sure to point out to my clients where they do deviate, that it's something that the readers will still enjoy. As an editor, I can't sit there and say, well, I think it's best if you did this, if it's not what the genre calls for.
Mm-hmm.
As a reader, I always give them notes as a reader and as an editor. As a reader, when I see them do something that's just a little bit out of the ordinary, create a character that's a little bit different than what everyone's used to, I love it.
Mm-hmm.
And I always let them know, me as a reader, I love getting this slightly different take on a genre or a trope that may have been going on for a few years now and might be a bit repetitive. I love it when I see people breathe new life into it. And I love being able to be a part of it.
Yeah, so I did this thing in Multiverse where we were critiquing, just 3 or 4 pages of a story. Most of them were the beginning of this. In fact, all of them were, well, except one. But the couple that I got to see, they were beginning of the story. But the one thing that was, and it was great writing. I mean, the writing out there right now is second to none. I mean, it's stellar right now. There is so much
Yes.
good writing. But I think what is being lost in that is storytelling and the aspect of storytelling. And I know I'm a 3 act person. You're a 5 act person. We've had that conversation before, but but it's still storytelling in any aspect of it. There is a certain way in which a story comes together, and you see it, and it invokes reaction from a reader. It invokes reaction from the audience, and if you don't grab that right away, that's the toughest part. I think I've seen from writers who are very talented. They know how to describe something. They know how to get you emotionally involved, but they lose the point of view, and losing the point of view is everything when it comes to. I mean, we just talked about Angelique. Angelica is the focal point for other stories you're telling, because you have created such an incredible point of view that it's hard to ignore that when it's in the same verse, if it's same ideology, same area, right? And I know you do that purposely, but still there is something to be said for a strong point of view moving a story forward, especially if it's going to be a series, right? Is that, I mean, are you conscious of your point of view when you're starting a series, and how do you monitor it as you go along through each book, basically, is what I'm asking, because I think that's important. I think that's a storytelling element that is missing.
One of the things, that you need, and I think it also depends on who the many writers have read before they begin writing. For me, of course, I always mention Stephen King. I mentioned Terry Gilliam now, Darren Shan. They have long series. They have a wide plot that they've planned out meticulously. But something else that they have that a lot of people and a lot of writers now, or writers who write long series, lose along the way, is a very strong main character voice. And I think a lot of people now, they focus so much on the plot
Hmm.
because, of course, it's the plot that makes you write to market, that gets you to sell. They often forget about needing a great character. I have told clients, I have told people I have arc read for, this has been going on, for 11 years. You need stronger characters.
Hmm.
Your characters cannot be a cardboard cutout that people have done dozens of times before. You need to give them a personality, a voice, a point of view. You could have the greatest plot in the world, but if your main characters are flat, it's not going to hook a reader.
Yeah.
It's not going to make you as the writer want to write. Um, Most of the times, and I'm only speaking as a reader now, I haven't edited for, some of the people that I'm thinking of. But as a reader, I have read quite a few books, if it's to market or to genre, where you can tell they focused on the plot and did not, again, focus on the characters. And then I'll see them post online about how they're struggling to write the rest of the series. And I have, written a couple of people. Of course, my opinion isn't wanted, so I can't exactly do that to everybody.
Right. Sure.
But to writers who are watching this, flesh out your characters. It's your characters that are going to drive the plot more than anything else. And it's your characters that are going to bring people back. Not to bring up an absolutely horrible person, but one of the ways that Harry Potter almost failed was Harry was not an interesting character, despite being a POV character, but everyone else around him was.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people, you never hear anyone say, my favorite Harry Potter character is Harry. It's always someone else who's so fleshed out.
Yeah.
And so deep and so different. And, please don't follow her as a human being, but if you're going to follow characterization with lots of different characters that pull the reader in and keep them wondering about things, though that actually is a great series to do that with. It makes you sympathetic towards the villains even.
Yeah, for sure.
Another thing that Darren Shan did very well as well with Steve Leppard in the Cirque du Freak series. It made you very, very sorry for this absolutely evil as hell character, which is what I also tried to do in Paranormal Detectives Book 7. I don't want to spoil it for anyone, but a very evil character comes back. And I always knew what this character was going to do at the end of this book.
Mm-hmm.
And I was so worried about doing it. I'm like, I don't want people to like him, but he does something very heroic after spending, 180 years being evil. So, and that was very, very important for me to do, because sympathy for the devil, for real, sympathy for the devil, it really does drive books, especially someone like me who loves villains.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you made me think about Star Wars, all of that. I mean, the idea of Luke Skywalker is pretty bland when you first meet him. In fact, he's pretty annoying when you first meet him.
Yes, I was just rewatching them.
Yeah, and Darth Vader is this interesting character that you wonder what's under the surface about, right? And especially when he starts to come out and give Luke instruction and show him certain things about himself that he wasn't being told, he was being shielded from. And then, Darth Vader has that moment, right? And I don't care if I'm spoiling it for anybody who hasn't seen it. I don't care. These movies are 30, 40 years old.
Yeah, if you don't know how Star Wars, what happens, that's on you.
Yeah. So, I mean, so he has that moment. He has that moment of redemption that we all wanted to see happen. And it made so much sense, and you made me think of that when you were talking about all that, because and your stories as well. But Anita says, yeah, series needs a strong main character, and Ron says, agreed, I love me some villains. And finally, Star Wars.
Yeah, we haven't gotten any of those.
Yeah.
Since before I was born. But, I'm going to say something that's going to make a lot of people absolutely hate me. But Star Wars is not the strongest story when you think of the first 3 films. They basically copied a Western but took it into space. It copied that formula.
Yeah.
But what made it so great were the characters.
Yeah.
Princess Leia and Darth Vader. I mean, R2-D2. You have sympathy for this little non-speaking robot. You just absolutely love them. So that's what Star Wars did right, was getting the characters right.
Yeah.
And I think, anybody who's watching this, who's writing books, or maybe they're wondering why they're struggling, why you're not getting read through, characters first. The plot will follow your characters, especially if they're interesting enough. Or if they're troublemaking enough and get themselves into enough trouble, like Paige.
Well, and if you listen to them, if they talk to you, which it does for some people, their characters talk to them.
Yes.
If you listen to them and just follow their instruction, they're going to lead you to the right place. I mean, I know so many authors I've already talked to this season have told me about that and talked to me about that. And it's kind of, okay, yeah, you may not want to go there with the story, but trust that instinct because I think that instinct's right most of the time, if not all the time.
Yes. And like 99% of the time, yeah, the instinct is correct. I mean, sometimes we have to tell our characters no.
Yeah.
Sometimes
Shit.
we have to.
Yeah. Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, Star Wars is King Arthur in space, but especially when you're about to kill them, then they really start to talk to you vocally and get louder. And no, you're still dying. Get over
Yeah. Yeah. Like, why did you do this? You can give me a separate series. No, sorry, you and your husband are both dying. Sorry.
it. All right, so before I get into the tropey aspect of things, I did have one question I wanted to ask you, and I'm setting this as kind of a trigger warning for people out there. This may invoke some emotion, so just be. I've already talked to Lily about it, so I've been okay to ask it. So, you lost your mother earlier this year, and she was a big part of the reason why you're even here doing what you're doing and everything like that. Maybe the biggest part. And so I'm kind of curious though, now having some time on your own thinking about it, is there something that she did, something that you took from, when you had to, kind of think about her and everything like that? Was there something that she gave you that you didn't know was there until now, or that you didn't expect that you're seeing from her that you're now using for yourself? Did she leave you with something that you didn't have when you knew she was there, essentially?
I know what I'm going to say, and this is going to sound trite to some people, but I hope as I go on and explain it, confidence and critical thinking skills. My mother was the alpha reader. She was the one who, if I was stuck on something, she would have to sit there, and I would go on sometimes for over an hour monologuing about the issues that I was having in my books. And it was a 50-50 where I would directly ask her for advice, or she would just sit there and she'd have this look on her face like she knew, and I would talk myself out of my plot hole because she was there listening.
Mm.
And most of the times when she wouldn't give me any sort of advice and would just be there, that's what gave me the confidence to work through my issues and thinking skills. Her picture, her memorial card's on my desk, and I will talk to her when I'm having problems with my characters. I know she hears me. And that's something that she left me with, was that ability to work through and not give up on my characters just because they're giving me a tough time. And my characters always give me a tough time. Anyone who knows me knows that I'm always arguing with these people. Either they won't talk to me or they won't shut up. And yet she was so patient with me. She would sit there, I said, sometimes for over an hour and just listen and just be there for me. And, if I needed her to read the scene, she immediately, her tablet was out. Okay, send it on over, I was very lucky to have that in my life, literally in my house, sitting, right next to me.
Yeah.
And, I know a lot of people don't do that. A lot of people have, a lot of, large critique groups. I'm very grateful I never had to, ask strangers. I had someone who was going to help me work through my own problems or give me real advice. Like, just because she was my mother, she was not, I don't want to say she wasn't kind, because of course she was not forgiving. If I had an issue, she knew. Reading in books and loving all of that runs through my family, from my grandmother on down.
Yeah.
So she always knew as a reader and as a person, and was always able to help me through if I did have an issue with an actual scene that she was reading. I'm very lucky that I've had a critique partner who supported me so much.
And you still do. Like you said, she's there to listen. And that's pretty amazing. You can't ask for something more fortunate in life than that. That's how I feel anyway. But.
No, I see a lot of people who talk, a lot of writers, that their parents won't read. I mean, I did edit out the sex scenes in the Hellcat books. I wouldn't let her read that. But she was always, again, it's going to sound trite. She was my number one fan. And I'm very, very lucky because not everyone has that.
See, I would have thought the opposite because she worked in rock and roll. She's probably seen some things.
Oh, no. She has. I mean, she has a mouth worthy of my characters, believe me, and a mind worthy of it. But it's the fact that I wrote it. I want another reading it.
She's still your mother.
Yeah. Oh my God, no. There were some things that she said that even I would be like, "Whoa, you're my mom." Wait, but I loved it. It gave me a very sense of freedom where I'd also didn't have to run off and sneak off and do things. As a teenager, where she was very open.
Yeah, I got you. Along with that too, she had a business savvy about her, and you guys created this the partners in crime together. And did she leave you anything business wise that you feel like I know that's very clinical to ask, but I feel like that's important because you are still running the business, and so I'm curious if there's anything you glean from her business wise that you're kind of glad that you have right now.
Two things, and one is very specific to me, and one was more about her.
Mm-hmm.
And it was always to keep your integrity.
Mm.
No matter what happens with the client, if it's a bad client, if it's a book that you don't want to represent or don't want to edit. And she always taught me integrity over money. Like, yeah, that's a paycheck I'm losing, but that's a piece of my soul that I'm keeping.
Right.
And that was one of the earliest things that she taught me. And the other thing was, and I have talked to her photo about this just in the past few months, because don't procrastinate. If you have something to do it.
Oh, yeah.
The task is in front of you. There is your daily schedule. Get it done. No excuses. Even me being, if I get sick, if I don't feel well, if I have anxiety, whatever, no excuses. I'm getting that work done.
Mm-hmm.
She was always, one of the things she'd always tell me is, you're stronger than this.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever I would not. And that's the thing that I'm taking as a business person. Whatever comes at me, whatever gets thrown at me, whether as a writer or as an editor, now as a promoter, I'm stronger than that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's an attitude a lot of business people need to have, especially writers, because this is a brutal, brutal profession.
Yeah, especially on the soul, especially on you. I mean, there's so much that you carry with you, and it's heavy-handed in a lot of respect.
Yes, I mean, I have sat there and cried because of my characters. I have a story that I want to write. I've wanted to write it for a little over a year now, but due to some certain things that have gone on, I'm really glad that I put it on hold, because it would seem like I was money grabbing for someone else's, tragedy, kind of.
Sure.
And I've sat there with the characters in my head, and I have bawled with my main character, with what she has to go through when the guy that she loves leaves. And I've just sat there, and it's very heavy. You feel them as though even though they're just inside your head and they're inside your heart, they're very real.
Yeah.
And the emotions they evoke are very real. And it's a lot to carry with you.
Yeah, I think that's the secret. I think that's the secret sauce is, making them real on the page is as real as it's going to get. And it's very real. And when you do that, people respond, usually, anyway.
Yes.
Unless your characters are Harry Potter and flat. But I know that feeling. Anita says characters are a pain. Characters are a pain. God, characters.
They are. I have one of my clients who has thankfully become a very good friend as well. She's like me, where the characters are almost constantly talking in her head, and so we'll be messaging each other like, can they just stop? We have one book. Can you wait? Just wait. Put a pause. You don't need to keep talking right now. It's a pain in the ass. But it's nice knowing other authors who feel that way and can commiserate with you.
Yeah, you don't feel so alone at that point.
Especially when you have
crazy.
You see people doing the tropes and doing the right to market.
Yeah.
They don't have the characters talking to them.
Yeah.
So if we were to say something to them, they would think we'd lost our minds. Like, what do you mean don't outline the characters, just tell you things? Like, they just tell me things. It's very odd for a lot of the newer writers.
It is, yeah. I think And I think that's kind of the sign of the times too. A little bit, we're so disconnected from human nature, and a lot of emotion. We tend to bury it a lot more, and not let it come out. And I think our characters help us get out there. I think I would be in a lot worse place mentally if I didn't have an opportunity, an outlet to get those out of me.
I agree. The Coven series, I had done that not really intentionally. When I was writing it was during the previous president's term, and there was all of these horrible things going on. And writing these books where it did get very political in a fantasy setting
Mm,
helped me work through all of the anger and angst that I had over that. And now working, like I said, on the wrong book, Evie is my trauma dump for what's gone on for me the past year. And it's
that's not.
very difficult. I've sat there bawling writing scenes, but once I'm done writing it, it feels better. Something, again, to anyone who's watching this, if there's something that you've struggled with, don't think about it as you, think about it as your characters. I can guarantee that it's going to help.
Although we should preface that by saying, if you have some mental disabilities or mental things that are much more disabling you than the average person would, and you'll probably know that. Well, hopefully you know that. Go get some professional help, please. don't
Yes.
don't just put it on a page. Please do seek some mental health counseling or some help in that
And
way.
actually, if you do need that, show the writing that you do to whoever you get help from.
There you go. Yeah. Hey,
I've talked about my writing with my therapist. It's a
yeah.
lot easier that way.
That's a great idea. Actually, they should have you write more stories. I think in therapy that would be interesting. I wonder if that might be a good thing. Hey, if there's therapists watching this, make us authors write. That's where we feel more comfortable. But I do want to get a little bit more lighthearted here, and talk a little bit, well, toward the end here, about following tropes, but being careful about how much you follow, because as you mentioned, you didn't want to disrespect the cozy genre, you didn't want to respect the cozy reader, so you did invoke a lot of the coziness that goes along with those, but you also had to sprinkle in you in there. So how do you walk a tightrope like that? What is some steps that you took to kind of walk that tightrope? So you kind of did that. Was it in the edit? Was it initially as you were thinking about it? Where was it as well? I'm kind of curious about that.
Well, I knew going in when I got the idea for Page's books what genre I wanted. So,
Hmm.
I mean, read the genre, I knew what it needed,
Hmm.
but I also know what I'm like. So I
Hmm.
just let the words flow. And it was during editing where I saw things that needed to be cut or changed in
Hmm.
order to fit what the genre asked for without losing my individuality as an author. I don't want it to be, you know, cozy mystery number whatever on someone's shelf. I want it to be something someone sees. That's Page's book.
Hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Not that's just oh that's just another mystery. I want them to know that's her. I want it to leave a mark.
Hmm.
Because people don't look at a lot of bookshelves and say, oh, that's a women's fiction book. They'll say that's a Colleen Hoover book because that's a type of author who leaves her mark. So that's what I wanted to do. Is I wanted to make sure I respected the genre while leaving my mark. And during the editing process, I made sure that my mark was there, but the genre shone through me, as opposed to just throwing the genre on paper and I'll cut it up, I'll do whatever I want with it. No, you can't. Certain genres you can't do that.
Yeah.
It's the same with Sweet Romance. When I released
Yeah.
Talk for Christmas last year, you know, what I did change was I changed how the main character behaved, the main
Mhm.
female character. It's the exact same trope you go through, but you're seeing it through someone brand new's eyes,
Gotcha.
which
That's
is what I
interesting.
hope that makes it stand out.
Yeah. You know, I'm wondering though, is there a trope that you were absolutely for sure in anything, not just the cozies, but maybe even in the paranormal stuff? Was there a trope that you were absolutely sure you were never going to invoke or have a part of your series, even though it might have helped genre wise?
I don't want to say, because obviously I do write it, but I did not want to put any more steamier romance in Paranormal Detectives.
Hmm.
After book one, even the 5-star reviews, a lot of people were saying, it needs more romance. I'm like, the romance is going to pick up, but there's not going to be sex. That is not, it wasn't going to fit. It would have helped the story sell way more,
Hmm.
but it also didn't fit.
Hmm.
And I think readers of urban fantasy would have understood that reading it.
Yeah.
We got a lot of PNR readers reading it, despite the fact that it doesn't have a lot of on page romance. But the romance is important because it plays into the backstory that happened thousands of years ago.
Hmm.
So that was the only thing that I ever said I will never put that in. I mean, there's nothing I'll say I'll never ever write or do because you don't know what the brain and the characters are going to come up with next. But that was the only thing I was very adamant on, was not adding on page sex or steam to PDS.
Was there a time when you wrote something that specifically you were aiming for a genre, but because of all of the things that started to happen with characters, or it went a certain direction that you didn't expect, that changed the genre for you? Were you okay with that? Did you go with it, or did you try to tailor it to back to the genre you were initially hoping it would become?
It was Stakeout, the first Paranormal Detectives book. It was going to be a standalone horror novel. It was not going to be urban fantasy.
Oh, interesting.
And the more that I wrote, Angelica had more to say. So, and I've said this before, I cut 20,000 words, added 10,000 more,
Yeah.
and then added 7 more books and spinoffs. I was very happy with what happened. I was glad that I listened to her and didn't just go with, the ending that I initially wanted.
See?
It was going to have the same setting, but it was going to have an entirely different outcome, an
Mhm.
entirely different, gory scenes. And while I kept horror throughout the whole series and the occult, I did give it that urban fantasy adventure bent that I really love.
Were you mentioned tailoring the sex scenes? Were you worried that you were going to be put into a YA box at that point, or do you feel like everything else would have kept you away from that?
Oh, everything else definitely would have kept it away. There's a lot of violence, a lot of cursing, a lot of torture. I know that goes into violence, but violence and torture are different to me.
Yeah,
That's why
yeah,
I
yeah.
always feel the need to differentiate the two.
I'm just thinking about the cursing aspect of it, because it's like, you're a Chicago girl, and you've been spent time in LA, which, if you don't curse in LA, then you're in trouble.
Yeah, I've been trying to be very nice. So I've been talking here. I've been trying to be extra professional, but I had to go through Paranormal Detectives. I actually even removed a lot of that because I was like, okay, Angelica, you swear more than me. You got to chill. It's
You're
not
worried about getting to
it's properly
Scarface
on
levels.
page. I was. It doesn't transfer properly on page, even
Yeah,
though colloquially, that's very normal. It doesn't
yeah,
transfer well when you're reading. It seems
yeah,
repetitive to use the same word over and over.
yeah. That
So
makes
that's the only
sense.
reason it got cut. Because
That
yeah,
that's
she's worse than me.
that's an interesting word find. Putting the fuck or the shit in there, and let's see how many I really have. I don't ever worry about it too much. I think if it's used in context and properly, then even if it's excessive, there's cause for it in a lot of respects, I think. But I do think, I don't know if I'm not sure if a story's ever taken me out of because of too much cursing or too much violence. Even I'm not maybe too much violence. There might have been a story or two I've read that it was like, okay, it's enough is enough with the killings and the gore. But I'm
That's
not
another
sure.
thing that can get repetitive.
Yeah, yeah, and it maybe kind of dilutes the story too a little bit, or or takes away from the characters too and their journey. You know, I've always believed that you tell the story you're meant to tell and not deviate, and that's always been my problem with like high fantasy and epic fantasy is there's a lot of deviation from time to time, and I get once that happens, you lose me. It's going to be hard to get me back. I have a hard time with that, but that's just me personally as a reader. But
I have the problem where I love the deviation. I love all the little subplots and side stories. They're like side quests in a video game, but in novel form to me. And one of my constant
are they like
gripes that I'm
secret
going to
doors in
continue.
video games and stuff like that? Are they
Yeah,
like secret
yeah.
like little codes and stuff?
Yeah, like the side quest where you have to go, you talk to an NPC character and they send you off, the main goal, you have to go find their sheep or whatever, depending on what kind of game it is. But Lord of the Rings, the movies cut out Tom Bombadil because it was superfluous and unnecessary. And I will forever be mad at that because that was one of my favorite scenes in any book ever. And I'm always going to be mad at that because I love those. But me as a writer, the genres I write in, there can't be too many subplots. There can't be too many side quests. So I have to limit them. Only once did I allow myself to like really give it a side plot, and that was in Coven Book 4. While it still fed the plot, I felt readers needed to know some of the things the characters did, even though it wasn't absolutely necessary, just to know them better. So I kept the scenes. Everything else gets cut.
Anita says one of my characters swear it, but in British, so I got to mix it up.
Yes, awesome. It was fun doing Paranormal Detectives. I've got the British cursing and American cursing. It's fun.
Yeah, and there's some certain
a lot of British cursing doesn't get censored. So I was able to use a lot more of it in the Coven series, which is set in Scotland. I didn't need to drop anything need to be censored at all in order for them to curse. It's great. It still kept it YA.
I wonder if that helped with the European aspect of it too, because like when I put my book out in Germany, I had to change certain things because the German culture would have found that offensive. So like the German publisher I had me like not it was nothing that was like truly with the plot, but more of what the character was saying, because certain words that translated in German or that they read in English because they know the English translation of the word they're thinking of is different for them. So there was a couple things I had to like adjust for that and change the wording of. So, I mean, I got a handy thesaurus to do that, but it was interesting. So I'm kind of, if you're doing something in like a British slang, I'm wondering if that's more acceptable throughout Europe, because I'm sure they hear that all the time.
Probably. And Australia as well. They have a lot of similar, though some of their cursing is a lot more colorful. I have a few Australian clients I love editing for. It's because some of the phrasing they'll use is just like, I've never heard this before, and I got to try and remember that. It's great. Yeah, I think it's a lot more acceptable with less need for change. Mm-hmm. Actually, Germany is one of the countries that the Coven series in English sells best in. So I guess it transfers well somehow.
That's awesome. Well, I would love to sit here and talk to you for another hour because it went by really quickly, and
it did.
And as always, it's a fantastic conversation. I will mention, I'm just gonna pimp something of my own here to mention, because we did sit down with Lily about a year ago, probably about almost a year and a half ago now, and did an origin story with Miss Lily here, and it was a fantastic episode. And I hope more people go find it if you've really enjoyed this interview, because we do go into depth a lot about, we do talk a lot about Paige and Angelica in that show, but also a lot about Lily and her journey, and which is something that we kind of touched on tonight. But I do want to mention that show, so everybody go check that out. And I'll put it in the description so people can find it easier. But
thank you. I know I've told you this. When I got done with that interview, my mother actually clapped and said, "Well, how great you were," because she's heard me do a lot of interviews by then. Yeah, she loved it.
Can I mention what I told you about what she told me?
Can I? Yeah, of course.
Yeah, because so she reached out to me after that. It was a couple days after, and she messaged me and she said, that she was very thankful to me for showing you the respect and doing the research that I did for that, because she felt like that was really an in-depth interview that she doesn't hear very often. So that meant a lot to me. And I hold on to that very, very carefully, and just, I feel that. So that meant a lot. And so I really appreciate it. I mean, there's a moment in there where you can hear her laughing, everybody too. And I thought very, very hard about, there's no way I could cut that out. I had to keep that in there. So
you're so glad that you did.
So yeah, it was very cool. So that was a very important thing, and I really appreciated that. So it meant a lot to me. So but as you do, my friend, you mean a lot to me as well.
Thank you.
And so let's have everybody, since we've been talking so much about these books, tell everybody where they can get these books and your services if you are so inclined to want to hire some, Lily, and maybe find out if she's taking new clients. I don't even know that. I might be speaking out of turn there, but tell everybody where they can find you and how they can get in touch with you.
If you want to find my books, all of them are available at Amazon. And so you can just search my name, which you can see down there, or type in amazon.com/author/Lily Luchesi. Again, the spelling is down there because I know it can sound a bit odd. That is where all of my books are. I do plan on getting more of my paperbacks available slowly. I hand format everything, which is also a service I provide for Partners in Crime Book Services, where everything's hand coded, hand created, one of a kind. So it takes me a long time to do my own books. So while I'm helping my clients, my paperbacks sort of kind of fell to the wayside, but I'm hoping to get those up too. So if you're a paperback reader, please hold on. They'll be coming soon. And if you are looking for my services, I freelance for indie authors, and I also am hired by traditional and independent publishers as well. You can reach me at Partners in Crime Book Services on Facebook, or you can also go to smarturl.it/PIC services. And there's a contact form on the website that you can use. And it also lists prices, services. And if there is something there that you think you need that you don't see listed, message me. If I can't do it, I have a ton of people that I can recommend you to.
Awesome. Well, thanks everybody for joining us for another 21 Grams. This was another great conversation. And thank you to Lily for spending the hour with me and talking. It was a wonderful conversation, my friend. Thank you so much for that. And
thank you again for having me.
Absolutely. Remember that, everybody, that's always time to go indie now. And we'll see you soon. We got a lot of great programming this week, so stay tuned.